Welcome to the Irish NFL show in association with Quimbat. I have to say, I know I missed their debut last week, but I do love those new titles, the graphics from our artist in resident, Craig Rigdon, who absolutely raising his game season after season. He is locked in for 2025-26, no doubt about that. Hello to all of you joining us on X, YouTube, on Facebook, and on IrishNFLshow.com. Thanks to all of you, of course, who are watching us back after the fact or are listening to the podcast. Kieran Boyle, Brian O'Leary, and Shane Brennan here with me, Conor Brophy. We're going to look back on some of the preseason action from over the weekend in week 2, where, as usual, some players are getting hyped and others wiped before a meaningful snap of football has even been played. We'll have our own takes on who actually is hot or who is not before the new season starts in earnest. We'll also catch up on some of the other NFL news surrounding injuries, potential trades, hold-ins, holdouts, contract negotiations, injury concerns, and all the rest of it. Brian, let's get to some of the preseason reaction. Or sorry, Kieran, I might actually go to you on this one because Trevor Lawrence looked pretty locked in that Jags game, in as much as we could tell at this stage as they played the Saints. Looks like the combination or the pairing between himself and Liam Cohen, so far so good at least.
Yeah, it was a tight little start. You know, he didn't stay in there for long. 8 for 10, 76 yards, a nice touchdown pass to Parker Washington, an underrated wide receiver who doesn't get as much kind of props as he should in that wide receiver team at Jacksonville. But the main priority for this team is, you know, the kind of hallmark of the Jaguars for the last couple of years has been sloppy play. It's been inconsistency. It's been, you know, I'm not going to say an overpowered O-line, but it's an O-line that needs a lot of work and a lot of toughening up. So those are the things that Jags fans wanted to see, and they saw that from Lawrence. They saw clean, tidy football, cutting down the mistakes. Penalties, I don't think there was any penalties when the starters were out there. So that's what Cohen wants to see. Keep it moving, keep it fast, keep it going through his progression. So he'll be happy with what he saw from his starters. Nothing much else really to report. You know, the report of the starters got out of there pretty quick before anything else could have happened. And, you know, as generally happens with these games, I'm not going to say the quality went down, but when the second, third, and fourth starters get in there, then it's all up for grabs. And you know, between Tyler Shock and Spencer Rattler, who Rattler made a nice little name for himself towards the tail end of the game, bringing them back, ends in a tie. You know, that's not a great Saints team, so they'll be happy. You know, you could see during the game they were happy with the touchdowns and happy with some of the plays they made. So it's a little confidence boost for a Saints team who are struggling and are going to struggle, and for the Jags, that's another game. It's another live game where they can work on cleaning up mistakes. Eliminating the turnovers, the fumbles, and getting back to football where they're going to need to be on top of their game and playing tight football in that AFC South division.
A little bit of a shame that Travis Hunter's injured. I know we don't care so much until we get to the regular season, but you know, we're missing out on the chance to see him, having watched him play a couple of snaps at least in the first preseason game. How much of a concern is there over that? Is he going to be ready to go?
Yeah, I think all the outlets here say it's all precautionary. He did get a little run out last week on both sides of the ball, so and he has been working in practice and training camp, so he has been getting the reps in. But again, like anything else, you'll see all the teams starting to get tight, especially with the third game of the preseason. Nobody wants to give a hand or tip their hand. Nobody wants to get a player out there who shouldn't really be risked to be out there. So I think they're doing some kind of behind the scenes stuff back in Jacksonville as well. So I wouldn't be overly concerned. This is a guy who's going to be electric out there, but they're going to be very, very, very careful with him over the next couple of weeks. I think we have about 3 weeks till the weekend kicks off. So they'll be very careful with him going forward.
If you are looking to see Travis Hunter and how electric he can be during the regular season, incidentally, you should check out our competitions across our socials at the moment on X, on Insta, and on TikTok. You can enter a competition to win a DAZN Game Passes. We've 3 of those up for grabs. Give you an NFL season pass so you can watch the Jags or indeed any other team if you want to, week in, week out, and indeed catch up on all the preseason action, hard knocks, and everything that goes with it. You can check out our socials at IRE NFL for details of that competition. We couldn't make it simpler for you. Preseason game over the weekend between the Bills and the Bears as well, Shane, and not the best outcome in the world for your AFC East rivals there to the Pats, the Bills, who got called out after the game by Sean McDermott. So unusual enough that happens in preseason play. They lost 38-0, which would make most people shrug their shoulders. The Bears starters going against the Bills second stringers for a couple of series in the first quarter at least. So that would explain some of that. But McDermott wasn't happy with the effort level from the Bills 2s and 3s, so he's trying to set the tone early ahead of a season in which Buffalo's expected, as they have been for the last couple of years, to be a contender and trying to do yet again what it takes to get over the top. Sean McDermott didn't feel that was in evidence over the weekend.
Yeah, it just goes, I think, to sort of reflect the importance of these preseason games. I think in sort of building the right mentality in the camp, the Bills know full well that a strong start to the season is very important because they're chasing the AFC #1 seed. They have to play against the Ravens on week 1. Any sort of complacency within the building, and obviously leaving any field after being shut out was against the Bears in preseason, regardless of whether it's 2 or 3s, is not a good feeling to have at any point. And this is coming off the back of a fairly sloppy defensive performance at times against the Giants the previous week as well. Like we sit here and we can look around the league at how different teams have been approaching the off season. Like we look at the Jets Giants, for example. I think we look at the Jets, for example, when they played against the Packers last week, that really puts a focus on trying to get strong defense. The Patriots and the Dolphins, I think, are trying to build some form of momentum in the preseason. Everywhere else in the division, the preseason is being used as a springboard. And for the Bills, who have the highest expectations of the division to let it completely collapse, you can see that in the reflection, in the reaction of McDermott afterwards. So look, I imagine you've had a closer look at what actually at the sort of on field and sort of how well Chicago managed to find space when it comes to playing against that Bills defense. But I mean, like momentum means everything in this league, and whether it's that extra 2% in the preseason, it all counts.
And having watched the Bears obviously tear it up in preseason last year, they won all the preseason games. They were looking like the talk of the town on Hard Knocks, and then we saw what happened in the regular season. So yeah, I'm not going to get carried away just yet, but we did see some encouraging glimpses of Caleb Williams. Bears starters went in for 2 series, as I said, on offense. Caleb Williams went 6 for 10, 107 yards, 92-yard touchdown drive on their first possession, passer rating of 130. So look, all of that looks good and is as you would hope and expect if you're a Bears fan from seeing what Ben Johnson is doing on the offensive side of the ball. But, you know, other than that, it's obviously very hard to take an awful lot away. Olamide Zaccheaus looked pretty good. Luther Burden, the Bears wide receivers, looked pretty decent in a couple of his outings so far. We shall see whether any of that translates into the regular season itself. Brian, what we'd also like to see translate, and certainly you'd like to see translate into the regular season, if it does continue on the trajectory it's on, is the Jackson Dart hype train has very much left the station now. Everybody's looking to catch the dart.
Yeah, 14 of 16, 137 yards. Nice composed drives. Comes in for one play because Dable said after the game, I just want to put him in that position where he's not expecting to be in. And he reels off. Well, apparently it was a very short pass, but 40 odd yards. Look, everything's super positive.
This is why, incidentally, sorry to cut across you, this is why you need to be watching us live or watch back. You know, it's all great if you're listening to the podcast, and we love that as well, and we encourage you to do so. But you can see the barely contained glee on Brian's face. He's trying to hold it in, but all I can think of is Ashley Schaefer from East Brandon down. Woo, 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 woo. Can you feel it? Can you feel it in the air?
Well, there's another Brian that's trying to hold it in, and that's the head coach, and Brian Dable. So even my dog is barking with the excitement in the background. But look, I said it last week. I think what's going to happen is the growing impatience for a lot of fans to see him, no matter how successful the team is early on in the season, because with all due respect to Russell Wilson, and that is another positive spin that the Giants are putting out there, how well he's playing and how well he's managing this offense under Brian Dable. There's a few sketchy passes on Saturday intercepted, but Dable immediately after the game could have put that down on the wide receiver running the wrong route as opposed to Russell Wilson. He wants to keep Russell Wilson onside. I still find it very difficult to see when Jackson Dart is going to come in early on in the season, unless it's a complete implosion early on in the season, which I don't believe it will be, because as we've discussed separately, this defense, as well as another positive in this early campaign of preseason, where they look good, everything, the right things are being said about Alvin Carter, all the other players look up to it. Like, this defense could keep them many games early on in the season where they may find ways to snatch victories. But Jackson Dart is providing the moxie that a lot of Giants fans want to see. He seems to be adapting very quickly to what's expected of him. He comes across. He shows all the mannerisms, which Daniel Jones never did. You know, he seems to be embracing the New York. All the players seem to be rallying around him. It's all super positive, Connor, but we've been here many, many times, no matter what the circumstances are, what player is, what team it is, where everything is great now. But ultimately, when he's going to be under pressure, if he gets an opportunity this season, the New York pressure can ramp up very quickly if he's not successful. But right now, it all looks super positive. I would say one other thing which has been overshadowed. And again, I'll caveat it's preseason. Some of the late round selections by the Giants in the last few years have actually delivered on. So far, so good with some of the players. Like to say, I like Kieran. We seem to have this problem at the moment pronouncing players' names, but this 7th round pick offensive line looks like he could be an immediate starter. And there's other players, a tight end, which I'm not even going to have a go at pronouncing his name, who was picked in the 6th round, and he's also delivering. Like it could be a year where we see players across the board from all the various different rounds really adapt and play well.
Kieran, let's move on now from preseason to talk about some of the more interesting stories from around the league. The Bengals, you wouldn't say, are a team that necessarily stands out in terms of how they manage contracts. There wouldn't be the greatest front office in the league at times, and it doesn't look like the Trey Hendrickson situation is necessarily going to resolve itself anytime soon. He's holding in at the moment. There's a lot of teams that would take Trey Hendrickson off the Bengals' hands, are in a position to do so. It might be a slightly different situation, say, to Micah Parsons, where you'd be looking at probably a couple of first-round picks. Pick for Hendrickson plus a player. You could add yourself an edge rusher who could make a difference. If you're the Bills, if you're the Lions, if you're one of those teams, the Packers even, who may see themselves as one edge rusher away, they're playing with fire in Cincinnati.
Connor, was that to me? I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi.
Sorry, it was to you, Kieran. Yeah, apologies.
Sorry. Yeah, well, I heard you talk about Trey Hendrickson. Yeah, I mean, it's there's a lot of teams interested, and I know the Bengals are listening to offers. A lot of teams need pass rush out there. Carolina, they players, teams like Seattle, Colts, Packers, even the Lions. There's a lot of teams out there need pass rusher help, and it does look like it's going a little bit south there. He held out a long time. He was down in this area for a couple of weeks, but before going back up to Cincinnati. So it's not quite the Parsons. I don't think it's as harmonious or lack of harmonious with the Parsons situation with the Cowboys, but I think it's not looking great for his situation with the Bengals, and it's probably moving on time. And there's going to be a lot of, similar to Parsons, there's going to be a lot of teams going to be interested.
Shane, another player who looks very much like he's on his way, regardless of what happens in Cincinnati. On the other side of the preseason game that's actually happening tonight is the Commanders. That was a great regular season matchup last season. Looks like Brian Robinson might be on his way from Washington. That's one that's looking near enough to be a done deal. They're actually sitting him this evening.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, it seems like the all of this good momentum that's been building behind Washington, it seems to sort of take a bit of a stop here because, here's a guy who has been, in this situation for the last couple of years, is all of a sudden looking for a trade. What interests me, and it's kind of similar to the Trey Hendrickson situation, is how long have these things been bubbling in the background, and what's changed for a lot of these teams in the last couple of weeks? Because I think we're at the time of year now where a lot of these trades have been, or people moving away from clubs has been sort of bubbling in the background in a way that teams may not have been interested in, and now we're seeing a lot of these teams are realizing, oh, actually we have a problem here, and trying to make trades, and like these things only come out into a point where we hear about it if there's people actually genuinely interested. What I'm really looking forward to trying to see who feels that they need Brian Robinson Jr., feels that they need him now, and to what extent that's going to have an effect on the market. Same with Trey Hendrickson as well. We were talking about earlier. I mean, there's a guy who has been given permission to seek trades, but is now the team are listening to trades. That's two different things. That means that there's actually interest, and there's interest where teams are going to try and outdo what the Bengals were originally beginning to offer. So look, it isn't a massive knock for what we can expect from Washington this year. I'm not so sure. It'll be interesting to see, but I think Brian Robinson is a good pickup for anybody who feels like they need to splash the cash.
But Kieran, and I might just bounce this back to you, because one of the reasons why the Commanders see Brian Robinson as being expendable is because they picked up a 7th round running back that they're quite excited about in Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. He's been one of their buzzy players at training camp. Just, it says everything about the running back market. Like Shane is saying there might be teams that are in the market for Brian Robinson, but at the end of the day, a lot of teams figure like you can get value in the draft, and they're not going to go to town for anyone who's not Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, and this is a guy that played with Ted McMillan at Arizona. That was a great tandem of those two. And again, yeah, that's pretty much from what you read. That's the reasoning that Washington are are letting or thinking about letting Robinson go. Seen a lot of speed out of this kid. The other factor involved is Robinson. I know he had 8 touchdowns last year, but he struggles to get over 1,000 rush yards. I don't think he broke 800 in the last 3 years. And Washington are now.
You're spot on. He's averaged under 800 yards. He's 2.329 over his 2 seasons. Now, he handled a couple of passes last year. He 36 receptions for 368 yards and 4 touchdowns in 2023, which would have been his best season operating out of the backfield as a pass catcher. But look, as we're saying, Saquon, he ain't.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. And Washington are on that crest. They're at that crest of last year, and they want to keep going and keep pounding. And they're not 100% sure that Robinson is the guy that's going to.
And they got Deebo Samuel there as well, right? You can run him out of it. You can run him out
exactly.
Of the backfield. He'll do a job for you.
Exactly. And in this league, the top teams, they've got a certified RB1. You look at Saquon and what he did. Even James Cook up in Buffalo, you put that in that category. And I think the Commanders want something more out of the running back position that the Robinson just can't give them right now. And again, a lot of great noise about Krusky Merritt coming out of camp. So it looks like they're going to hang their hat on him and see what they can get for Robinson. Again, a lot of teams looking for running back, so I don't think they'll have any trouble dealing him and getting a good return for him.
Brian, when we were talking about the Trey Hendrickson holding there, we skipped you. I know you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah, I'm probably just reconfirming a point which has been made not just this evening, but time and time again. Connor, you reflected on if you're going to invest a significant amount of your cap offensively, there's always going to be a fall guy. And we suggested at the time, as good as Hendricks has been, the sacks, the numbers, he's put up over the last 4 or 5 years. You could argue he should be up there in terms of defensive player of the year. But the Bengals may reflect on this now and look at this from the long point of view of like, what are we going to get back in return? Because we could get a reasonably strong opportunity. They're going to bring back some really nice picks for next year's draft, but ultimately it's going to be the questions are all going to be around this defense, because we saw last year the defense didn't hold them in a lot of games until later on in the season. Hendrickson is trading with a new defensive coordinator. Like, the pressure's going to be on them, and every time they lose a game defensively, it's always going to be about the fact that Hendrickson isn't there or won't be there.
I just don't think this is the piece that you trade with. Like, I would rather have seen them let go of one of the wide receivers that they paid. Obviously not Jamar, but I think they should have let go of T. Higgins. Like, Joe Burrow can make that offense home no matter who you put out there. I think it's a similar situation to Kansas City. He's just that good. You can keep the offense on the rails, as they showed last season, in a season that was poor for them. Like, Burrow put up incredible numbers, and that offense was tearing up the field, even against some of the better defenses they faced, probably most notably the Ravens and indeed the Steelers. Hendrickson is not the piece I'd be letting go. I mean, the bottom line is, and I don't want to be stealing the point here, but as I think Mike Florio was saying on PFT this morning, if teams are willing to offer you a player plus a first-round pick for an edge rusher, it's probably because he's really good. You kind of want to hang on to that guy and pay him.
Absolutely. And the Bengals, who are going to go into the season, they're going to be heavily, I suppose, a lot of people have expectations again that they'll be in the playoffs, like having lost out on last year and the run they went on. But like, you can only imagine the minute the season kind of goes off kilter very early on, the pressure will be immediate. There'll be expectations that they're going to start off. They've got to start off the season fast. 0-2 the last, I think Zach Taylor's only had 1 victory on the opening weekend in 4 or 5 years. Like, it's not good enough to be 0-2. They're going to have to get out to an early start. And if it doesn't work out that way, you can only imagine the questions that are going to come with that.
Yeah, big time. You're probably going to get some pretty big questions from Joe Burrow if you let a major piece of the picture go like that as well. It's probably not something that's going to keep him happy. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
This is Ireland. Rugged, wild, and endlessly captivating. A land shaped by history, where ancient castles whisper stories of the past. Where world-class links golf connects you to breathtaking landscapes, and where centuries of craftsmanship and culture are blended to produce world-class whiskies, savoured as music and laughter fill the air. Adventure calls from every corner, and tradition pours from every dram. Step into landscapes that take your breath away, and moments that stay with you forever. From vibrant cities full of life to warm welcomes shared with friends old and new. Golf and whiskey are just some of the ways we connect you to Ireland's culture, craft, and soul. But every journey with us is about people, place, and authentic experiences you'll never forget. This is more than a trip. It's the Dunes and Drams experience. Discover Ireland with us and make memories that will last a lifetime.
And that is indeed the Dunes and Drams experience. Dunes and Drams, our travel partner, are recently on board, and we're delighted to have David Hayes on the team with us. Check out Dunes and Drams for all your whiskey sightseeing and golfing needs. They really do put together some spectacular packages, and we're very happy to be working with them. Brian, Joe Flacco starting as QB for Cleveland. We thought we had a quarterback competition in Cleveland, but it was more like last man standing because the other QBs were dropping like flies. You know, they were kind of making a mockery of the old, if you have two QBs, you have none argument. They had 5 at one point. But Joe Flacco is the man back in the job, took them to the playoffs, and he'd love another crack at it.
It doesn't really come as a surprise, does it? I don't think anybody genuinely felt that the rookie quarterbacks and Pickett were really the ones that were the answer in the long term. Like, again, it's a stopgap situation, but I suppose they have the security blanket that Joe Flacco understands the nature of what's expected. He's been there before, had that successful ending to the season a couple of years ago, understands the Kevin Stefanski playbook. It makes total sense. It's probably a little bit surprised it was announced so soon. When I say so soon, like, I know we're a couple of weeks away from the season, but I felt this might be one that they might let run towards the back end, if anything, just to have a competitiveness in the camp. But they've obviously seen enough. They know enough. They know that he's the most reliable. But interesting now, what happens to who's the domino here? Because like they can't go into this camp with it. Just doesn't make any sense to hold on to all these quarterbacks. I think Pickett inevitably will be the one that goes. But look, it's been a strange way of things, the way things played out when you have Shedeur in the 5th round, but you've also already selected a quarterback in the earlier round, so the question marks were always going to be there. But it makes total sense for me. I think Flacco will give them that little bit of upward turn that we didn't see on the offense for large parts of last season with Deshaun Watson at the helm.
Kieran, where do you think Shedeur stands after all this? We saw him have a half-decent outing in the preseason. He's kind of shown that he can do it, or at least has the potential to do it at this level after all of the dust has settled on the dramatic draft night. He's probably in a better position now than he was when he was drafted.
Yeah, I mean, he did himself no harm in that decent performance in the first game. Again, you know, people can say that he's he's going a little overboard on the flashy stuff, but that's who he is. I know he didn't play last night. I think he was being held out for an injury. But again, that's probably a good thing for him because, you know, there's no more talk about any picks or interceptions or anything bad that he might have done in the game. So it's probably a good thing from his point of view. I'm just really interested to, like Brian said, in who's out, because, you know, I actually think Pickett might survive the cut, just purely based on the fact that he's got NFL experience. I think Huntley is dead man walking, and I'm basing this off nothing other than a hunch, but I would not be surprised if Shedeur gets his walking papers and he ends up on the 26th looking for a new team. I just think that it's Stefanski, like the reason why, you know, he's going with Flacco so early. It's muscle memory. You know, he knows what he's got in the player. But I'm not 100% sold on the fact that Sanders is going to stay there. And again, this is nothing but a hunch. But I think for him right now, it's all about keeping the head low and not drawing too much attention to maybe the, you know, quote unquote negative side of his character and his performance, and let his football do the talking. You know, he's released a couple of videos with some other, you know, NFL alumni in the past couple of days on YouTube. So I think it's for him, it's more about just keeping the head down and seeing how this all plays out. But again, nothing more than a hunch, but would not be surprised in the least if something happens there.
Look, it's all about Mel Kiper anyway at this stage. We need to rehabilitate Mel's image. That's the only thing that counts with Shedeur. We all know that. Shane, interesting comments out of Elliot Wolf at Patriots HQ. He was asked about whether the Patriots might be willing to trade some draft capital and would they be interested in trading a first rounder if it would help the team. It's one of those kind of pointed and slightly out of left field questions that you kind of feel something was going on. Dare I suggest that there was collusion between the Patriots and a member of the friendly media, but it's kind of put the cat among the pigeons a little bit. A lot of people now suggesting, whoa, is he prepared to, or are they prepared to make a move either for Trey Hendrickson or potentially for Micah Parsons? Because when you think about it, the Patriots are one of the few spots where if Micah genuinely did want out of Dallas and has been pushed in that direction by the way that Jerry Jones has handled the negotiations. And look, we've seen players throw the toys out of the pram in Frisco, Texas before. It happens all the time, and then it gets done. That's the way the Cowboys do business. So I don't want to overload on this, but Patriots might be an intriguing landing spot. They have the salary cap room to sign whatever player they want. And if they're willing to part with draft capital, they could make a Micah Parsons trade happen.
Isn't it interesting we live in a world where the media and a Patriots GM are somehow, people could talk about this, potentially work together as if there's some sort of symbiotic relationship. It was an interesting one. I think it was Mass Live who asked the question.
I'm glad you asked me that.
Oh, I have a good one here. I think it was Mass Live who asked the question, and one of those ones where like you don't know whether the question's asked and Eddie Wolf just gives a sort of generic answer, being like, "Yeah, we're open to all options," kind of thing, and it's written in such a way to try and get people excited. But either way, I think there are certain elements of this that could potentially make sense. Obviously, if you look at, the Patriots have put so much capital into the offense and so much thought that actually that a star defensive player might be the thing that gives them the sort of star impetus to change things. And like you alluded to earlier, no team has got more money in the bank to play with than New England at the moment when it comes to the cap space and where they want to try and bring in that kind of star. I think the biggest thing that's sort of holding it back, though, isn't necessarily like to what extent the Patriots are actually in conversations with Micah Parsons. Up until this point, there's been no sense of that. I mean, any conversations around Micah Parsons based mainly on his own actions in the media has been talking about him trying to find some way to move to the NFC East, and that may have been done so we can try and leverage more money out of Jerry Jones, because the last thing Jerry Jones wants to see is his star player in another NFC East uniform. The AFC East is a bit less bullish. But I think the biggest takeaway from me this week with the Micah Parsons thing is the fact that we've actually heard very little new about it. And usually in Cowboys world, that means there's actually a bit of work being done behind the scenes. And they've decided to just not talk about it because they don't want to jeopardize anything. It's been different in previous weeks when Jerry Jones isn't doing any negotiating. So all he has to do is make a soap opera out of it, because that's all he knows how to do with his spare time. It's different when he's locked into conversations and trying to knock out a deal. I think this is a time when you could probably read it that there's probably a bit of progress being made behind the scenes in Dallas, and they've just been disciplined enough to not tell anybody about it. But hey, it's nice to speculate, or at least have belief that if Parsons decides that actually Dallas isn't the place he wants to go to, that the flying Elvis could be on his helmet rather than the big star. So it'll be fun if the move is made, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, big time. But as you say, and that's probably the smartest way to look at it. Jerry Jones is clearly doing something when he's not talking about doing something, and he does love, as we all know, to drag these things out. He's very much of the view, he takes the Oscar Wilde notion on board, that the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. And they like to do these things in public. They like to drag them out to the nth degree. They like to create drama, and they like to keep the attention on the star at all times. But worth mentioning, though, I read a really interesting piece of analysis that Bill Barnwell did over at ESPN, where he broke down Cowboys' negotiations with CeeDee Lamb and with other players over the last couple of years, and how much more money they ended up paying by adopting the negotiating stance than they would have done, perhaps. Now, I know you're dealing with hypotheticals here, in fairness to Jerry Jones, but Barnwell's analysis is really good, and he's saying, well, look, if you'd done the deal here based on what other players were being paid in the market, rather than waiting until the last minute and doing it in the way you did, you'd have been looking at millions of dollars in savings. Clearly, that's not something that Jerry Jones cares enough about. He'll take the millions of dollars worth of publicity that he is getting. That brings us to the end of the show for this evening. Thanks for all of you to all of you rather who tuned in to us live. Listen back to the podcast wherever you get yours, and do please remember to like and subscribe to the Irish NFL Show.